Voilà, ma li vediamo in onda. Buonasera, buonasera New York, welcome to Milano. Non vi vediamo. This is Filippo Bartolotta, wine journalist, wine critic, wine speaker, wine everything, a life of wine. Actually, I started off with my nonno. My nonno was making wine. I hated it. Only like harvest time was good because my parents were getting hammered. Bevevano, quindi erano più tranquilli, si faceva più gli affari nostri. But I still remember those picking the grapes. And because we're still on harvest time, that is one of the things that I recommend anyone in the wine trade or just as wine lovers, do not miss the opportunity to be in the vineyards. I know that it sounds like banal, but it's not. Above all, knowing a lot of people in the world. Ciao New York, eccoli là. Tac, guarda che posto fighissimo. Very elegant spot. This is Milano, say hi. Ciao ciao. Eccoli. Oh, ma c'è c'è gente, c'era di già. Guardalo, lui l'ho visto con la giacca verde. The guy with the green jacket was there. Allora, I was telling everyone how we're going to do a little bit introduction once again. We have 8 wines to go. We're going to talk about Versanti. I was talking about harvest. I do believe that people have to go in the vineyards because it's not like, you know, if you are a food critic, some people say you don't need to be, edgy. You don't need to be a chef to be a food critic. So you don't need to be a winemaker to be a wine critic. And yet, when you go into the vineyards and you taste the berries, it's so clear. And it took me so long, because I even had my nonno just doing it, but it took me so long to go back to that idea. You go into the vineyards, wherever you go, whether it's Prosecco, oh, questo è uno spot migliore, senza la luce sugli occhi, perché comincio a aver sonno. You taste the berries, whether you are with the Glera in Prosecco, the Pinot Noir in Oltrepò Pavese near here, or the Pinot Noir of Franciacorta. You try the Nerello Mascalese from the Mount Etna, or the Grillo of Marsala, or the Sangiovese in Montalcino. And it's so transparent what you should expect in the glass. We are used... devo venire sotto la luce, vero, mannaggia? We are used to a world instead that it seems like all of a sudden, you know, wine gets into the bottle. So, landscape and literally the berries will tell you everything. So, if you go into a landscape that is like mountain landscape, you should expect the wine to be zesty, crunchy, refreshing. The color should be brilliant and transparent. If you go to Salento in Puglia, where you have the 2 winds of the 2 seas, and it's south, okay? Or if you go even in Sicily, in the Mount Etna, you can actually see Africa. Africa is closer than the rest of Italy. You should expect the fruit to be ripe. If you go and try the berries in these areas, you will see how if you eat a berry of Nebbiolo, or if you eat a berry of Aglianico or Cabernet Sauvignon, you will, Negro Amaro, that means it's a double-edged black, right? It's dark, inky, thick skin. So if you come across a Negro Amaro that is thin, transparent, dilute, there's something wrong. If you have an Aglianico that is like super dilute, it means that the winemaker maybe didn't really get the good amount of fruit from that plant. Maybe too much, and that's why it's dilute. Or maybe you get into a Pinot Noir or into, for instance, a Schiava or a Lagrein that instead of being transparent and red ruby is dark peach. There is some, maybe you've asked too much from that berry. That's why I'm inviting everyone just to go eat those berries. If you were to go eat berries of Sangiovese right now, you will see a bunch, roughly out of one plant, you'll be having 1.2 kilograms per plant. My nonno used to be proud to bring home 25 kilograms from one plant of Sangiovese. Okay, this is a first beginning bit. There are some areas in the world, still in Italy as well, where you go visit a winery. Some people are not even ashamed to tell you that they bring home 20 kilograms from one plant. And maybe they say, well, you know what? We're going to dry the wines out. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. And then the remaining, still, you're just asking too much from that plant. Montalcino is a place where winemakers have grown so much. It's a place that started off with the right foot from the mid 800s. 1865, Italy was about to be unified. Biondisanti family starts this project. 1888 is when Brunello is made. Since day one, Brunello didn't change the attitude. Brunello is one of those few areas where Brunello di Montalcino says it all. Brunello, it means the little brown one. Some people say it's different clone and everything. That's a different story. It is Sangiovese. Clonal selection, Biondisanti has invented maybe the first BBS, Brunello Biondisanti. But the idea of the Biondisanti family was to produce a wine that was conceived not to be drunk immediately, like most Sangiovese in Tuscany was back then in the day. Not all of it, but most of it. And to get something that was going to be able to age for many, many, many years. So this project was born from the beginning with the idea to build something that wasn't going to be just a wine. The great thing about Montalcino is that very soon they got recognized, because when you start getting lower yields per hectare, when you start being careful about using the big oak barrels as big as that screen over there, Sangiovese needs a very long period of time to get to ripeness. That's why the 5 years. Now, for some people, maybe these 5 years are too long, but they are too long when usually you have winemakers that are not very skilled. Cioè, keeping a wine for 5 years in the cellar, there is so much that can go wrong. Okay, so much. So it's much easier to use less oak, put it in the bottle, done, you're safe. Some of the Reservas and some of these Versanti will stay in the barrel for 3, some even 4 years. Is that going to affect the wine? Of course it does. But the bigger the barrel, the less the influence of the oak in the wine. That's as a general rule. So for many years, the big barrels were the only barrels available in Montalcino, all the way up to the mid to late 80s, when the French barrique, 225 liters, so barrels that are like this big with 300 bottles inside, started to arrive in Montalcino. Was that a good thing or a bad thing? Well, you know, like for a moment, there's been a moment when it was like the thing. Like the big barrel guys were bad, like old, nasty, dirty, too tight, too austere. So all of a sudden you have the barrels, the barrique, that makes wine in a way easier immediately to approach with a smoky, vanilla, darker color, because the smaller barrel helps the wine to fix the color. And then it was a moment when this happened, and we are going to 1995, 96, 97, super hot vintage. Actually, in America, it was said like the vintage of the century, because it was a very forward vintage. Why? Because there was a big hailstorm that basically did a natural green harvest when winemakers weren't still doing the green harvest. And as a result, you had more forward, sweet-driven Sangiovese that all the critics fell in love with. But they were even too ready to drink. So 10 years on, and a lot of the 97 Brunello, I'm afraid to say, that didn't keep that well. And that is the moment all the way between 97 and 2003, another little disaster happened in Italy, in Europe. Hot, heat, so hot that wild boars were eating the grapes to drink. So hot that the berries burned. So hot that the vine, fermatemi se vado troppo veloce in inglese, so hot that the vine stopped leaving. Like the vine, if it's too hot, it goes like shuts down. All right? And for 2 weeks, the vine tries to keep itself alive. But the problem happens when heat occurs. That phenolic non-maturation is seldom going to be able to pick it up again. So you have a pause in maturity that you're never going to get it again. So some of the worst things happened in 2003. Not always, but super alcoholic wines, jammy fruit, so marmalade, overripe, and green astringency on the palate. Like the worst that you can get in a bottle of wine for me. Is it like this for everyone? Of course not. But as a general rule, that's what happened in 2003. Why am I talking about these two vintages if we have the young ones? Because these two vintages made people in Montalcino, but also in the rest of Italy, understand how to be more focused and concentrated in the vineyards rather than just in the barriques or whatever else. All of a sudden, we have a switch back into agriculture, less in the still vats, selected yeast, and cryomaceration, and all the technology that, the frenziness that everyone had in those years. And so now we are in a great moment when the winemakers in Montalcino are seeing a new generation, the young generation, kids that right now are in their mid-20s, early 30s, enology students, kids, they're kids of the winemakers that have been tasting so many wines in comparison to their fathers and mothers. And so they're more open-minded, and yet they have an approach to winemaking that is somehow more old school. They try to be less intrusive, way more organic farming, sometimes even biodynamic, very careful about sustainability. So it's a great moment. But talking again about the barrique and the big barrels, there is a comeback. So a lot of people that have been using so much barriques, that I'm not against, by the way. I'm not one of those, crusaders against the barriques. Not at all. I love wines made in barrique, like in Burgundy, Bordeaux, even in Italy. But the more southern you go in Italy, and the more difficult it is to use barrique with some of the Italian indigenous varieties. Should you be making Cabernet Sauvignon in Montalcino? Sweet. Barrique is fine. Because Cabernet Sauvignon is like a very thick-skinned guy. So like you can cope with anything. But Sangiovese is thin, very delicate. You want to be menos es más. Okay? And so that's why there is a lot of comeback in the big oak everywhere. Montalcino is a square. This is my Montalcino. Now, c'è un altro, potevo avere qualcosa di meglio effettivamente, ma insomma, this is Montalcino, and Montalcino is a quadrilatero, is a square with 4 rivers, the Orcia, south, Asso, north, Arbia, north, Asso, east, and Ombrone, west. Montalcino is up here, 600 meters above the sea level, right? Like, boom, is over here. It's cold. It's windy, it's breezy. Summertime, don't be mistaken. Don't go there with your t-shirt and you're just gonna be standing on a beautiful terrace like the Titanic looking with your girlfriend or boyfriend. Just like, you need a jumper because it's cold. If you go there in the early morning, it's really cold. And even sunset, always windy, which is good for the grapes. Less powder, less mildews. So, the paramount factor in terms of geology and geography in Montalcino are here. You cannot make Montalcino outside this notebook. You cannot make Montalcino. So if you have grapes of Montalcino, ecco l'uso del grissino, l'abbiamo scoperto. If you have Montalcino, if you have grapes like this, you can't make Brunello with that. That's clear in every appellation. But why can't you make it? Not only because the law says it, but because it's different. There are some guys on the other side of the river that always tell me, what do we have different from the guys in Montalcino? It's just a different soil to begin with, but also different attitude. Winemakers in Montalcino have been experiencing vintages for centuries now. Okay, there is a pedigree of experience and so-called best practices, shared knowledge, that has been going on and on and on. And so now what we know, that there is a lot of conversation going on about the Versanti in Italiano slopes. Which are the Versanti? Northeast of Montalcino. This is Florence, 1.5 hours drive. Siena, half an hour. Clay. Okay, you approach Montalcino and you don't need to be a geologist. You see some green, blue kind of clay. If you don't work that land well enough on a daily basis in summer, you're just going to have concrete. The vine is going to die. How do wines from this end result? Tougher, cooler, more, in general terms, more floral, usually with a lot of aging potential. Southwest. We're going down, by the way, as I'm talking about east, south, etc., you also need to consider altitude. So from 200 meters above the sea level, when you go up high, you're gonna be having, the difference is 2 weeks. People talk about Montalcino, but if you have vineyards on top of Montalcino, and if you have vineyards 200 meters down southwest, there will be 2, sometimes 3 weeks difference in terms of harvest time. C'è quasi un mese di differenza nella raccolta dell'uva. So è proprio un territorio diverso. It's a different terroir. So the southwest tends to be much smoother, rounder, more Mediterranean because the sea is channeled up by the Orcia River. Because there is sandier soil, they found the skeleton of an entire whale. A fossil, of course, of a whale. This used to be a Pliocenic sea. We're talking about 15 million years ago. Here, it's 140 million years. So older, really older soil, and pretty old, with lots of skeletons, lots of fossils, lots of shells. Then we move into the eastern Versante, southeast. So once again, you have the southern exposure, the southern heat, but also you have a drier condition that comes from the presence of a beautiful, mighty mountain that the Etruscans used to call il Sacro Monte, il Monte Sacro, the sacred mountain. 1,700 meters above the sea level, so 3 times the height of Montalcino, is protecting this area from the eastern winds, making this area the driest area in Tuscany. There you go. Coming up northeast, then you have some combination of clay and a little bit of more galestro. Galestro is a word to describe schistty soil. Soil that when you grab it from the ground, that you can break it with your hands. Okay, so like stratas, like they look like a pastrami. That's a good one. They look like pastrami, but they're tough. Quindi, Montalcino, Quadrilatero. What else is there to be said? The altitude. So the more southern you go, everywhere, and the sandier, the looser the soil is, and in general terms, the easier, the readier to drink Brunellos are. As you go high, what happens, you have 2 factors that come into place. Numero uno is that you have more compacted soil, more rocky soils, but also you have altitude. So you tend to have wines that are more on the red-driven fruit rather than black-driven fruit. 1964, intanto possiamo versare. Can we pour wines? Our friends in America and Milano become a little thirsty? Va bene, grazie. 1964, 12 winemakers come together and they create the Consorzio del Brunello. They start to set the rules of Brunello, 5 years for the Brunello and 6 years for the Riserva. Sangiovese, 100% by law, 2 years minimum in the oak, and 60 years on, and now there is 250 winemakers. Anche a me, grazie, un refresh mi fa comodo. Aspetta, questo è un... Da sinistra a destra. No, there you go. Deve avere tipo gli occhi come il polpo. No, scusa. Pronti? Quindi, value of land, 3,000%. 3,000%. People were giving land for free in Montalcino. Nobody wanted to stay there. As a matter of fact, it was so poor, that people in Tuscany were leaving. Everybody was going in the 60s, economical boom. Everybody was going to Siena or Florence or whatever. People poorer than the Tuscan people moved to Montalcino. Sardinians. That's why in Montalcino in Pienza you have the famous pecorino cheese. So for many, many years, a lot of these lands were in the hands of the Sardinians, and then all of a sudden Brunello starts to become famous thanks to an Italian-American family, the Mariani. They come over from Italian-Americans who were selling and importing wines. They purchased Banfi, and then we have, in the meanwhile, Barbi, that in 1962 sells the first bottle of Brunello in America. And the life of Brunello starts to come into place. We are now in the 70s, and then the 80s, and Brunello becomes a boom in America. So lots of different investments, and all of a sudden, one of the poorest villages in Italy becomes one of the most sought after, with an incredible combinations of factors, which is they're very like comrades. Although they're very stubborn and very competitive, when it comes to Montalcino, you go to the pharmacy and the guy in the pharmacy knows where Il Poggione is. You go to the service station and the guys will tell you where to go eat your pinci all'aglione, okay? So Montalcino today is a very strong collective brand. That is something that even if you don't know anything about wine, if it's Christmas time or birthday party, you bring a bottle of Brunello and people go, you love me, don't you? Okay? And us, wine lovers, why do we like Brunello? I think we like Brunello because it's easy to understand. It's easy to drink. But also, it's a collectible item. You can age it because there is a track-proven record of all bottles of Brunello, starting with the father, Biondisanti. I always like to tell the story of my relationship with Franco Biondisanti, whom only later in the years I found out that my uncle used to make his suit. My uncle was a tailor. L'ho capito dopo. Bartolotto, ma lo so che c'è un altro Bartolotto che mi fa I vestiti. Ho fatto, ma guardi, Bartolotto a Firenze siamo solo noi, c'è una famiglia. And I realized that it was my uncle that forever has been making handmade clothes to Franco Biondisanti. Cracking open the bottles of the 60s and the 70s, you'll find out how these bottles are 12 and a half in alcohol with much more acidity. Sì, bene, alla via così. Intanto vado avanti. So, let's begin. Where do we begin from? Cominciamo dal Poggione. Lavinio, nome che non esiste più, Lavinio Franceschini. The late 800s, a guy from Florence buys this beautiful piece of land, very massive, big, in Montalcino, in the southwest end, near Sant'Angelo in Colle. And they make wine for a good period of time until the point where there's two brothers coming out of Lavinio. No, not Lavinio. I mean, it's just like Lavinio and his wife, they had two kids. And one of the kids didn't later on had kids, so the company was split up in two with one rule. You cannot call the farm Sant'Angelo. So then you have Col d'Orcia that was purchased by Alberto Marone, il Conte Alberto Marone Cinzano in 1773. Today is in the hands of the Conte Francesco Marone Cinzano. And then the other winery, the other 50% of the winery became Il Poggione, okay, still in the hands of the Franceschini family. Poggione is one of so-called mothers of Montalcino. It's been one of those cellars that has been, like a point of reference. You know, when you have someone that has been making wine for decades before you, and then you have the little farmer with 1.5, 2, 3, 4 hectares. These guys have been helping those guys to make their wine. So traditional school, when you go into their beautiful cellar, imagine just to have these very, very, very large terrace overlooking a landscape that is 100, maybe it's even more, like it goes like this, 80 degrees, pristine landscape with the Monte Amiata here and the seaside over there. Broom flowers, olive groves, and nothing has changed. I always like to say nothing has changed for 500 years. Maybe there is more vineyards than there used to be, yes. There is the asphalt road, yes. Some polite poles, but Montalcino has been inscribed in a UNESCO World Heritage Site exactly for this reason. Because the landscape that inspired the painters of the Renaissance time didn't change. Guardate qua questo colore. Parlavamo di uva, assaggiamo l'uva del Brunello, which is juicy, acidic, lots of red fruit. The color of your Brunello has to be looking transparent, red ruby, and brilliant. That's how Montalcino is. You should be able to read your favorite newspaper in the morning through a glass of Brunello. Okay? Nose of this wine is seductive. There is a combination of sweet tobacco. I hate when people smoke tobacco in front of me, but there is a sweet tobacco. There is a vanilla note. There is a sour cherry. There is a truffle edge, like a white truffle. I think this wine, even without moving the glass too much, has got these super inviting aromas that are going to be moving slowly. They move towards also some flower, like violets, a touch of licorice, but also, licorice and anise. It's very complex. This is a nose. I could spend so much time. I'm not going to be doing it because I don't want to do the journalism showing off how many things I can find in here. But it's powerful. It's intense. There is so much going on. È davvero buono, cioè sono davvero toccato. Really, this is a nose that would touch me. I find it incredibly seductive. Very Montalcino. Leather. Dry herbs. È pazzesco, cioè veramente infinito. Bocca, sentiamo la bocca. Montalcino South at its best. Qui davanti there is a gentleman that is very happy. It felt like the director of an orchestra, right? There is sweetness. But when I say sweet, I always need to remind that I'm not meaning residual sugar. They don't play that kind of game. This is maturity of the fruit. Maturity of the fruit of a mighty vintage. 2016 has been a wonderful vintage because it's been hot during the day, cold during the night. The last few vintages for us in Italy have been difficult. Like, above all, if you live in the city, it's just hot during the day, hot during the night. Dreadful. 2016 has been almost like the 1985. Perfect vintage. All the winemakers in Montalcino are super happy about this. But one of the true secret was good rain, some rain during the vintage, but above all, these super strong thermal excursions from day and night, which makes the fruit of the vine, which is the grapes, become more perfumed. On the palate is silky, is very elegant. There is no traces of dry tannins, of how should I say, of oak spices. This is like big oak barrels for 2 years. The cellar is like a massive cellar underground. Ci siamo? Okay. The cellar is a massive cellar underground. And it would age really well over there. I'm just checking if I said anything wrong. That's it. We have 125 hectares out of 600 hectares in the property. But let's move on. And I love this. This is Montalcino. It's like this combination of a little bit of leather, tobacco, some dark, nutty aromas, but then you have the beautiful floral, the mountain herbs, right? Like you have this double character that is very beautiful, very Mediterranean, by the way, very ready to drink, and yet good acidity, so aging potential. Numero 2, guardate, qua facciamo una roba che è proprio nel mio Brunello. Andiamo da qui, guardate, rimontiamo in macchina, we get to Montalcino, and then we do here. So we are like right the opposite side, southwest, northwest. Carpineto. Brunello di Montalcino, this winery has been there from the 1967, 500 meters above the sea level. Earlier on, we were a little bit lower towards Castel Sant'Angelo, like a beautiful terrace, super windy, super open, super south. Here, we are a little bit more like higher, well, a little higher, 500 is quite high. You can actually see the fortress of Montalcino. It feels like you can touch it. You are between the Cassia and Via Francigena, two ancient roads. The color of this wine is once again beautiful because it's bright and transparent. I still like the nose. In here, I have more porcini mushrooms vein as well that comes through. You have still elegant plums, red cherries, blueberries, a touch of kind of like a balsamic, like a tea tree oil, like a propolis, bee wax. There is something that is waxy and medicinal herbs in this wine. I like it. More floral, more vertical, right? The other one was like more, come with me, tonight we're gonna have a good night, you know? This is more like I like to play, but there is more of a tight muscle structure. I was saying earlier on how the wines in Montalcino are not just like a Schwarzenegger, but more like a marathon man. So there is muscularity, there is tension, there is verticality, but it's something that is leaner. But leaner doesn't mean dilute, doesn't mean fragile, because there is structure, but it's a totally different structure. Less pulpy, more tense. And this is what happens when you go north. This is a great example. This one is a great example of the clay and the galestro, the schist, which is compacted clay throughout the years. What else can I say about this wine? But the fact that I think is gunflint. That's what it is. This wine is releasing some minerality that is much stronger than the other one. There is a beautiful violet note, almost like even some wisteria and orange peel. Ragazzi, ma io stasera, cioè nel senso, io pensavo, arrivo tardi, sono distrutto, ma questi vini sono in una condizione strepitosa. You'll see when I don't like stuff, people that have been seeing me going around today, they know when I don't like stuff, it's going to come out. So it's not just because I'm here and I have to be here. I really think that these wines are in bloody perfect shape. Numero 3 is Talenti. So this time, we're going south, and we're going next back to Poggione. So we're gonna get on the road and go all the way back into the road that is gonna take you to the Val d'Orcia. And Talenti is in the perfect spot, right at the middle of the valley, 350 meters above the sea level. If you cross from here, you're gonna end up in, there is a beautiful white road that nobody does it anymore, that will take you to the Abbazia di Sant'Antimo, a 10th century abbey built by Carlo Magno. Talenti, Pierluigi Talenti started off the business, 21 hectares. Riccardo is following through. This wine is actually one of my favorites. I am very fond of his selection. Fatemi dare un'occhiata, scusate, perché secondo me... Esatto. This is the straight Brunello, right? And I think this wine is smashing. It's like 35 euros. But you can tell that you're going south. You can tell that you're going more on the dry herbs, more on Mediterranean herbs. It is more macerated skin, like when you actually are, during harvest time, the skin of the leftover of the grapes. I think it's beautiful, this touch, this aroma, that reminds me also of the seeds when you crush them. Black pepper, red berries, rosemary, thyme and rosemary. Look at this. This wine, it's all about the crunchy acidity that is actually awakening you on the sides of your palate, making the wine, making your mouth salivating. This wine for me is screaming pork ribs. You know, this acidity, questo è proprio il vino da rosticciana, no? Ti sta chiamando. It's got like this beautiful acidity. It's saying like you can eat this like pork and have your palate cleansed by a dash of this Brunello. Let's be honest, guys. Wine was invented to satisfy our thirst. You need that. So, for me, this is a good example. Chi era con me prima? Some people that tried the Riserva earlier on, it was totally different, right? Dark fader, and this is young solo. Questo è proprio più, come dire, this is a good guy. But I think he's really a good guy, more transparent. There is more terroir in this wine, I believe, than his Riserva. Riccardo might not be happy for me to say that, but I think very often winemakers, when they are asked to work on a more ambitious project, like a Riserva or a Selezione, sometimes they overdo. I like the Base a lot, and most of my personal experiences with the old vintages Brunello actually are with wines that weren't Riserva at all. Sì. Perfetto, no? We have our gentleman with a beautiful tie here that is agreeing with me. He wants to have some pork ribs. Federico Gordini, Milano Wine Week. Can we have some pork ribs? It's about time that we... Or the risotto alla milanese, dicevamo, no? Un bel risotto alla milanese. You know, guys, that here they have this risotto with saffron and bone marrow that is going to blow your mind off. People in New York would love the risotto alla milanese. Vino numero 4. Vino numero 4, ragazzi, andiamo da southwest a northwest. So once again, we're driving back to the square of Montalcino. We turn left and we go towards the forest, towards the northern west forest. We're going back towards Siena, but we enter into a beautiful forest road, and that's what you find is little vineyard. Lovely. These guys used to be people, I mean, this winery has been there from 1874, but it was purchased recently by the Gamon and Hernandez family in 2003. Max Hernandez's father used to be the winemakers at Toro Vineyard. So he said, I want to go back to my DNA of winemakers, purchasing this beautiful winery. Perfetto. 30 months in the big oak cask. Once again, I don't know if guys in New York, you have such a beautiful days that we're having in Milano, because once again, I have witnesses. When I don't like wines, I tell them, like you can see my eyes. This is another smashing wine. Because I'm more inclined towards the Versanti than the Riserva. Sometimes the Riserva are overdone, but also it's the vintage. The 16 vintage is a beauty. Floral, much more floral. It's more about the sage flower, the rosemary flowers. There is the oiliness of oregano when you get the pizza out the oven. There is the smokiness of the pizza coming out the oven as well. Am I maybe a little bit hungry? But there are some spices, there are some sweet damsons. C'è un profumo anche questo, a little bit of a minerality, like some, when you walk on a river and you get these like clay pebbles, elegant muddiness I describe. I love this muddy northern clay soil because there is something elegant about it, but at the same time, it takes you into the forest. It's like you're going into a walk in the forest floor. The palate is, once again, look at this. Tac, clean. No? Try. You don't need to be an expert to recognize the quality of fine wines. The palate is clean. The palate is not dried out by anything. There is sweet, supple fruit, but at the same time there is structure. I gotta be telling you the truth, guys. 2015 was a good vintage. Everybody loved it because it was very forward. But 16, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, boom, 16. Well, let's be honest. There is also the factor that we have 8 wines in 250, so we've chosen some good stuff. Go away. Pinino, molto buono, bravissimi, devo dire. They've done a great job. I think this is my favorite Pinino ever. I've never been too fond of this winery, maybe because of the change of property and whatever, but this is a smashing example of the Versante Northwest. Allora, adesso andiamo con Podere Brizio. Nel frattempo io mi sento un po' così, con questo ultimo vino che non c'è, ma ce l'ho? Ci sarà? Allora, Podere Brizio, veramente diverso, no? Sentite che roba, che botta di Mediterraneo. This is very different from the last one we just had. That was elegant in a northern way. Grazie. This is sandy soil with some limestone. Although Podere Brizio is on the guys are, dove sono Brizio? Sono like at the beginning of the southwest, okay? So from Montalcino, you make like 5 kilometers and you hit the winery. These vineyards are more southern than the actual winery is. And verso la via della Maremmana, 11 hectares out of 33 hectares, reading some notes, and 60 tons per hectare, 38 months in big oak barrel. Podere Brizio has been purchased together with Podere Landi by a South American family, the Bulgaroni. They purchased 2 wineries in Montalcino, a winery in Chianti Classico, and a winery in Bulgari. Doing lots of renovations, great job, putting like great winemakers, a great team, and the result, you can tell with this 2016 vintage. Finally, this is the vintage when the new project is coming to place. more balsamic, more intense medicinal herbs, more roots, more cola. Sembra la Coca-Cola, però se dico cola la radice è più rhubarb. There is some incense and lots of raspberries and combination of a little bit of prunes here and there, but it's more on the red fruit. Transparent, brilliant, some tobacco leaf, a little bit of bay leaf, un po' di alloro. I was expecting the wine to become sweeter, given the place of origin. There is some oak tannins, a little bit, you see? I can see you guys. You are doing like, you are chewing. But there is something good that until now wasn't that evident, and in this wine comes through. Despite right now a little bit of too much oak spices for me, there is minerality. You see this like tingling sensation that you have on your tongue? There is still a little bit out there, like these tingling salty bites, salty crystals. So that's what I like the most about the wine. I have a little bit of dryness that comes through the palate. Maybe, although this is like only big oak cask, wild yeast fermentation, there is something, maybe these were big oak cask, big new oak cask. So there is a little bit of oak that the wine needs to digest a bit, and I hope that's gonna happen in the next few years. It sounds almost as if this wine was conceived to be more like a riserva than a straight Brunello. C'è più struttura. There is more austerity than the other wines. I have the feeling that this is a wine to wait a little bit, because there is a drier factor than the other wines, but there is good minerality and juiciness. So I'm actually less ready to drink right now, right? Andiamo adesso con uno dei padri del Brunello. We're going to one of the fathers of Brunello di Montalcino, because wine number 6 is Barbi Cinelli Colombini, has been there since 1352. 1352, 1, 3, 5, 2. 300 hectares, 300 botti. There is only 66 hectares of vine though, with the 300 hectares. Stefano Cinelli Colombini is running the show. Let's try the wine. Vediamo un po' il numero perché non voglio... esatto, scusate. Sorry guys. Ecco perché, no, mi era arrivata infatti la nota prima. Attenzione. Grazie Viviana, non ti ho sentita. Scusatemi, Beatesca. Beatesca, allora fatemi fare un check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, perfetto. Scusate anche l'ora. Allora, colore a little bit darker than the other wines. Un tocco un po' più scuro, un po' più garnet. We're going northeast. Beatesca is a tiny winery. We're just going to go to Montalcino and then drive towards Pienza, le Crete Senesi, ok? Furio Fabbri, sposa, gets married in 1991 with Benedetta Pasini. 2.5 hectares, 2.5 hectares, tiny winery. These people love the horseback riding. I have to be honest, this is one of their first attempts of making Brunello di Montalcino. They have this vineyard that has been there. I remember talking with them, 60 years old vines. Beatesca is the crasi. Come si dice crasi? L'unione di due. Beata e Francesca, the two daughters. È una congiunzione. Però, conjunction. Ma sì, no, c'ho la mia traduttrice preferita laggiù che ogni tanto ci diamo un po' di supporto. Una riunificazione. Crasi andava bene? Mi piaceva. Tac. Allora, naso di questo vino, andiamo un attimo a sentire perché c'è un po' più di estrattività. It's more extractive. It's got some northern clay power. It's got some, it's very much on the tobacco, smoky notes. Almost like it's got a little bit of peat, like a Lafroig. But together with that, you have some darker fruit. Like so far, we didn't see too many prunes. This is more about the prunes and dry figs. Proprio il fichi secchi, il dattero. There is also an aroma of a wooden-driven aroma, wood spices, like a licorice. You know, bit of alcohol whiff, quite powerful. Good minerality, tannins. Some tannins that are this is like, I was gonna say rustic, but these are northern Montalcino tannins because they are getting sweet on the palate. There is the alcohol that is actually making the wine also sweeter, but all in all, I find this wine that is screaming for meat rather than the pork. Here I'm going to be going for more of a brisket or a stew, un bel peposo, mi piace l'idea perché ieri sera mi ha fatto venire voglia la Cristina Ziliani del manzo all'olio bresciano. So something that is being cooking slowly with tender like meat to crush some of these tannins. But I think these 2.5 hectares for this new winery, I think this is a good attempt of an up-and-coming winery. Once again, vintage. Quando è buona l'annata, come nell'85, tutti fanno il vino buono. Allora, grazie prima per il confronto, diciamo, con la questione che mi avete detto che non era Barbie, e adesso andiamo con il vino numero 7. Wine number 7, we have Fattoria de Barbie. Red ruby, very much like when I got my first nose. Trust, always try to focus on your first sip. Trust your mind palace. You just go like that, you close your eyes, and then you catch. Right now I'm getting, the first thing that I got was like vanilla, cola, and blackberries. Now this is the moment in the vineyards, you have a lot of blackberries. But then there is more coming up. There is a farmyardiness to the wine. It's a little bit farmyardy, which makes the wine even more intense and intriguing. Some cocoa, un tocco di cacao, ma anche di cocco. C'è un tocco esotico, a bit of an exotic touch to this wine. Oh ragazzi, è buono. Anche questo, it's good. It's got some Earl Grey tea, bergamotto, molto buono. La trama tannica, the texture of this wine is very fine, very southern. Montalcino, I'm talking about. Good structure. This is like the fine grain of a tea, of the tannins of some smooth tea, with some exotic elements. Look at the color, red ruby, but also super garnet. 2 years in the big oak cask. Once again, you go back into this nose and it's pure cola. No? Diamene un altro allora. Oh, no, ma no, al commercio, la cola, Coca-Cola è commercio, ma cola no, eh. Ok, non gli piace, so our friend here doesn't like cola because it reminds me of Coca-Cola and it's too commercial. Va bene, bergamotto, spice, cinnamon, plum, blackberry and a black pepper touch. Let's wrap it up with La Magia. Attenzione, non chiamare l'azienda La Magia. We are next, like from Barbi, you drive another 5 kilometers, you go down south, and you find La Magia. From the Schwartz family, we have got here 1979 is when they got there, 15 hectares, organic winery, 500 meters above the sea level, and we are next to Sant'Antimo, lots of stones, lots of clay. And this wine is more on the leathery notes, on the earthiness. Leather, earth, lots of spices in terms of like tobacco, cinnamon. It becomes more of a Christmas kind of spices with some nutmeg as well. And oak-driven spices. A little bit musky, some mushrooms. On the palate, the wine is very strong, lots of alcohol, lots of mineral bites. The tannins are a little bit on the astringent side. It could be needing a little bit of time. It's 9:39. I'd like to ask New York, how you guys feeling about it? Do you have any questions? Do you have any comments? Anche a Milano. Come vi sono sembrati questi vini? Io l'ho trovati mediamente di grandissima tessitura. Those that were here with me, also with the Reservas, there is a different outlook, right? Like the 2016 vintage seems to be much more elegant in comparison to the 2015. 15 is more forward, is more on your face. Here is about the elegance, length, and longevity. Qualche vino that you like better than others? Any comments that you want to do? Non vedo da laggiù, New York, spara.
We have a couple of questions from New York. The first one, from a viticultural perspective.
From a?
From a viticultural perspective.
Sì.
How are they adapting to climate change? Are there challenges or changes?
Oh, good question. I think from a viticultural point of view, as of 2003, winemakers have become more careful to a lot of different things. They have learned how to handle green management with regards to the heat. So they know there is much more, there is less trimming of the leaves. There is much more presence of grass in an organic production. So in other words, nobody's using pesticides or herbicides. If you go to Montalcino, most of the wineries have understood that they need to keep a fresher soil. So if you do not use those kind of products, you'll be having actually a better result for the overall handling of the climate change. Also, something else is the vine getting older. People are trying to protect their vines because as the vine gets older, she'll understand better how to behave.
One more question.
Of course, alcohol is a problem for everyone. Not just Montalcino, eh? Alcohol is a problem. Depends how you handle it. C'è un'altra domanda da New York? Eh?
Yes.
Vai.
Are they allowed to irrigate?
No. They are not allowed to irrigate. It's forbidden. In most Italian DOCGs, it's forbidden to irrigate. You can only have survival irrigation. Like if you have a drought, you could use irrigation, but you know what? In most cases, there is no water to irrigate anyway. There's a guy over there that looks like Robert Parker. The guy with the green jacket. Go ahead. Milano, avete domande ragazzi? Considerazioni? Ce n'è un'altra da New York. New York batte Milano 3-0. Qui ce n'è una davanti. Scusate, vai.
Vado?
Sì.
What is the future of Brunello, and is climate change changing the way Brunello is being harvested?
Ancora. The way it's been harvested, I wouldn't say much the way it's been harvested. I mean, it's harvested earlier, for sure. And when I say earlier, I'm talking about 2, 3, 1 month earlier than what our nonni used to do. Climate change is affecting everyone. Is affecting everyone for sure. The biggest, it's clear as plain as the nose on your face is the alcohol, and that is the most difficult part to handle because in Italy, in the DOCGs, it's forbidden to do anything to lower the alcohol. Like you cannot use the reverse cones, you cannot up water, so that's a bit of a struggle. C'è un New York, ma volevo far intervenire anche il nostro gentleman qui davanti da Milano. Prego. Sì. Ok. Uh-huh. Yeah. Oh. Okay. So here in Milano, they're saying, first of all, I'm only a voice. I'm only a journalist. Sì. Like Montalcino, you mean? Yeah, so the gentleman here is saying like he's been tasting Montalcino forever. He loves Montalcino, and he's just hoping that Montalcino can keep this level of quality and status for a longer period of time. And I think they can. I think the new generation is better than the old generation. So I don't see any reasons why I shouldn't. But hey, I'm bold, but I'm not the genie, so I don't know what's going to be in the future. Ci abbiamo un'altra da New York, vero?
Yes, 2 more. The first one, what can you eat that's vegetarian with these wines?
Scusa. Touché. Sorry, you saw that I like my meat. Allora, dry cheese, you can have a lot of fun. Parmigiano, this is not stuff for mozzarella or ricotta, but it's more about Parmigiano, it's more about like dry cheese, it's more about a good, una bella parmigiana ortodossa con la provola affumicata. Una parmigiana with some smoked cheese is just like gonna be smashing. But attenzione, fish. A lot of people think that Brunello di Montalcino, the big reds, do not go with fish. I always tell the story. I was actually at the Metropolitan, at the Met, doing a tasting, a gala dinner for the trustee members with a chef. His name was Luciano Zazzeri, one of the greatest chefs Italy has ever seen on seafood. And he brought a dinner from starter to, not to dessert, but like all about fish. And there are some tricks that you can do. The sauces can become a little bit heavier. You can use some rosemary, some saffron, and all of a sudden, above all, this style of Brunellos, the lighter ones, I enjoy them a lot with fish or with some nice pasta with veggies. You need a little bit of fat and proteins, though. Whatever kind of proteins you choose, sometimes you need to break down. This vintage, for me, it's just like so good by itself. Like when a wine is so in balance, you know, I once had a conversation about a 1961 Bartolo Mascarello Barolo that I had, and the guy was a fisherman in Alaska with white salmon, smoked white salmon. There is no wine that can go with smoked white salmon, only vodka. And yet we were cutting the salmon and we were drinking this this Barolo, and all of a sudden we were meant to bring the Barolo for dinner. Bye-bye. We drank the bottle of Barolo with the salmon. Of course, if you just want to be about matching food and wine and you're just about to serve a gala dinner for 180 people, I wouldn't do it. But if you're home and you love this stuff and you love wild salmon, just go for it. That's my point of view on matching food and wine. Fine wine and fine food always works.
We still have 3 questions from New York.
Accidenti, non si va più a letto.
I'm asking you all of them all in once, then you can answer.
Tutto insieme. Ora mi vado a sedere allora, vai.
How is the region facing sustainability towards their communities and labor? Then,
Ouch.
which producers from this tasting is using BBS clone? And the last one, your command of the DOCG is quite impressive. How many visits to wineries do you take a year and what time of year? Grazie.
Allora, on the BBS, I don't know anymore, I have to be honest, because the world of clones and a lot of people are working on their own muscle selection. So today, let me see a second, if I grab it back. Today there could be, maybe Poggione has some of it. Carpineto could have some. Pinino. And that's it. I don't know if Barbie, if Stefano Cinelli Colombini, I would have to ask him, but I would tell you a lie if I said it. Sustainability and labor. That's an interesting question. I wish I had the president or someone from the area with me because I don't have an answer that would be backed up by data. As far as I can see, Montalcino is a land with a lot of spotlights right now. So in general terms, there is good revenues, good margins. And so as a result, as far as I can tell, as far as the conversation go with the winemakers that I know, the sustainability on that side seem to be pretty good. Montalcino, this Fuso goes 10 euros a liter. Is like really like most DOCGs goes down to 2 euros. So Brunello solds, on average, you find the least known bottle in the market here for 35 euros. So there is a good margin there and things are going pretty well. The new generation is bringing also fresh oxygen, and they seem to be wanting to be more sustainability, both on the green side, but also on the social side. As with regards to the comments on my command of the appellation, thank you. I visit wineries every week. There is not a difference between time of the year. Recently, because of harvest time, and after COVID, I haven't gone home. You can see my eye bags in ages. And so I travel a lot and I like to do back-to-back because this is when you just have an imprint that is much stronger. So you go taste Grillo of Marsala, Nerello Mascalese the day after you do Carignano in Sardinia, and then you do the Sangiovese in Montalcino, and then you travel for the Pinot Noir in Oltrepò and the Croatina, and then you move on. So that's what we do. We visit, I don't know. I started off in 1999. I don't know how many, like thousands of wineries, I guess. I never counted them. Fine. Grazie New York, arrivederci. Milano, abbiamo finito? Risottino? Vai. Grazie ragazzi, grazie. Grazie. Soprattutto alle 9:30 ho fatto 5 di queste. Grazie. Grazie mille. Vini pazzeschi, avete visto? Cioè, la roba veramente... Cioè, sono contento, abbiamo chiuso veramente in bellezza. Li ho trovati tutti di una limpidezza. Vero? Sì. poi sai cosa succede, Alberto, in queste annate buone? Cioè quelli dicono, sì, ma non è così buona. No, è buona.